And to help with our particles moving around the object, so around the skull, we can also set up a collision with the geometry. So let's go ahead and let's grab this chain over here. So we want to grab this object merge, which is just our geometry, and I will turn this into a VDB. So I will say VDB from polygons, and we want to use the same voxel size as our smoke simulation is using. So let's go inside here, grab the voxel size, copy parameter, and go to our VDB from polygons and paste relative reference. Okay. So the collision size should normally match your voxel size of the simulation. And we can also drop down a VDB smooth, and this is just to sort of help our simulation have a more smooth result. And let's maybe just set the iterations here to 1. And since this node, this VDB from polygons, is also operating on an animated object, we can see that this node recooks every frame. So we would just want to grab this time shift over here, duplicate it while holding Alt, and place it here, so it only cooks only when we have animation. So from 100 to 115. And because we are sourcing this in a simulation, and the simulation has 2 substeps, we want to make sure that integer frames is turned off. So this option over here should be turned off if you are sourcing this into a simulation with multiple substeps. I'll drop down a null here, and I'll name this to head collision. Okay, and I will grab this, Control C, and let's see where we have to source this in our simulation. So inside the .NET for our smoke, we have to create a new volume source, and I'll place the subpath to be this head collision that we created. And we don't have to check this enlarge fields to contain sources, so this can be off. And there's a preset over here at the top which says source collision. Let's see, oh, it just says collision. So just press this, and it sets everything up. In this case, since the object itself is not really moving, it's moving for 15 frames, but it's really unnoticeable, so we can get away without using a vector collision. So we don't need to source in the velocity for the collision. We will just use this collision, which is a simple scalar field, which this just simply says exactly where the geometry is and where the particles should collide, or rather the smoke. The thing here is that by default this looks for a source volume that's called collision, and ours is called surface by default. So if I go up a level, here we can see for the head collision that the volume is called surface. Okay, so just we just have to make sure that the naming convention is the same. So source volume surface, and target field will be collision. And source scale, let's leave this let's leave all of these as default the way Houdini gives it to us. So this can be renamed to collision. And the way the PyroSolver sparse is set up is we need to plug this in our forces input. So we are not sourcing it here with our other volume sources. And this is just the way the sparse simulation. And now before I play this, I can go to my smoke object and I can turn on collision. So this will now, so we can debug our result. And if I press play, we can see that our smoke successfully recognized our object, and so we will have collision as well. Okay, so I can turn this off, and we can rest assured that it's working. And we can also see that with the collision it has a nice contour around the skull. And all of this collision setup is basically just to help our particles move more across the surface of the skull. So this will increase a little bit the realism, and it will also give us a little bit more of an interesting shape, because the smoke is basically now being pushed in different directions by this collision volume. And if I play this now, we have exactly the result that we want. And let's go up, and I'll grab this import fields node, and we can cache this out. So I'll drop a file cache, I'll use a folder here, and I'll name this to head smoke. And I'll leave the frame range from 1 to 200, and I can save to disk. So now with our simulation cached, we will just say we'll just drop a null here and say that this will be our head smoke. And we can move forward with our particles.